Good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's presentation of Boosting Brain Health Through Engagement with the Inova Department of Neurosciences. I am Karen Carter, Director of Community Outreach for the Kensington Reston, an assisted living and memory care community in Reston, Virginia. At the Kensington, we have a passion for excellence in quality of care for our residents. We provide 24-hour on-site nursing, high care partner to resident ratios, highly trained and competent team members, enriching and meaningful activities, and delicious dining entrees, all in a beautiful and safe environment that feels like home. We partner with organizations that share our values to make the world a better place for people living with dementia and their families. We support initiatives for research, awareness, fundraising, and education, much like our partners at Inova. This presentation is in webinar form, which means your camera and microphones are off. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box. This evening's presenters will take time at the end of the presentation to answer a few of your questions. I am pleased to introduce the Kensington Reston's Executive Director, Angela Bailey, who will introduce our speakers for this evening. Angela?
Thanks, Karen. And thank you everybody for joining tonight. I am very excited to have you all here and very excited to introduce our partners from Inova. Tonight we have Dr. James Eklund, Dr. Hilary Getz, and Dr. Daniel LaRiviere. Dr. James Eklund serves as a professor and chairman of the Department of Neuroscience at Inova Fairfax. He also serves as the president of the Inova Neurosciences service line. His research interests include military relevant neurotrauma with an emphasis on blast and penetrating injury. He directed a neurotrauma laboratory at the Uniformed Services University, has over 160 publications and abstracts, and has lectured throughout the world in over 20 different countries. He is a retired colonel in the US Army and was deployed as a neurosurgeon to both Afghanistan and Iraq. He is also a founding member of the Mackey White NFLPA Committee for Player Health and serves as a UNC and independent neurological consultant for the NFL. Dr. Hilary Getz is a fellowship-trained neuropsychologist with Inova Neurosciences. She is a part of Inova's Brain Health Program, which is a partnership between Inova and the Center for Brain Health from the University of Texas at Dallas. That program is geared to protect and restore brain health across the lifespan with research, assessments of brain performance, and cognitive training programs. She also provides neuropsychological assessments to adult patients on an outpatient basis when injury or disease affect the brain. Dr. Dan LaRiviere is the System Division Chief of Neurology of the Neuroscience Service Line of Inova Health. He is a former Greenwall Fellow in Bioethics and Health Policy at the Berman School of Public Health, Johns Hopkins University, and a former medical malpractice defense attorney. He is the former chairman of the American Academy of Neurology's Ethics, Law, and Humanities Committee. He received his medical degree from the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, and from there attended the University of Virginia for his neurology residency and neurophysiology fellowship. After serving as a faculty member at UVA, he moved to New Orleans to serve as the vice chair of neurology and the program director for their neurology residency program, which he founded. He joined Inova in January of 2019. I'm very happy to present our speakers tonight, and Dr. James Eklund will kick us off.
Well, thank you, Angela and Karen and the entire Kensington team for the invitation. We're delighted to be here with you this evening. And fortunately, I have some very smart, talented partners here who are going to give you most of the information, but I'm going to kick it off with a little introduction. Because you see, we believe in We believe in the neurosciences that God's greatest gift is the human brain. It lets us think, feel, move, cry, taste, hear, dance, and love. In fact, it just makes us human. And unfortunately, in our world, we take care of people with sometimes pretty serious neurologic diseases. But with each one of these diseases, behind them, there's a person with dreams, aspirations, goals. And unfortunately, with the treatment and the disease, sometimes those goals through neurologic impairment get shattered. So we try to go beyond the standard rehabilitation and repair those shattered dreams by really providing a personalized rehabilitation for those that end up with neurologic deficits. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the art of kintsugi, but it's rumored to start in the 15th century where a Japanese shogun broke his favorite tea bowl and sent it out for repair. And the first repair was unsightly and didn't work well. It was together with just staples. So he found a different craftsman, an artisan, who really repaired this with gold lacquer and gave this broken teapot a second life, a very beautiful second life. But we're not just focused on disease, also on the effects of age. And why is this important? Well, when you think about it, it was only 66 years from the time the Wright brothers flew that first plane at Kitty Hawk to the time we put a man on the moon. One lifetime. And with the information age, with the advances in medicine, the improvement in cancer and heart disease, what's happening now is people are living longer. So our grandkids are going to be living well into their 100s. And the question is, how do they want to live? Because as a society, we really haven't put a lot of energy into neurodegenerative diseases, brain health, into just the neurodegenerative diseases that affect our ability to function and live happily as we age. So what happens when we age? Well, there are some things that are decreased, and we know about it. Our fluid intelligence is what it's called. Our processing speed slows down a little bit. Our executive function and reasoning ability can slow a little bit. Working memory, episodic memory is a bit decreased. And we also decrease normal neuroinhibition, which is our ability to focus and turn off irrelevant input. Perhaps that's why the grandkids, noise is more bothersome to us when we're grandparents than when we're parents and we've learned to turn it off and put it out. But not everything's bad. We also have things that improve, what's called crystallized intelligence. As we age, our procedural memory actually improves and gets better. We have unconscious implicit memory as well, which I like to refer to as wisdom, which truly is accentuated. Our semantic memory, or we know many more facts. We may have forgot some of them in our working memory, but we know an awful lot of fact-based knowledge. We're more emotionally stable and we have better avoidance tactics for stress. But can we improve our cognition? Can we fight this aging? And the answer is yes. And Hillary's going to tell you a lot about that in her upcoming slides. Just in summary, what do we know? There's a lot of stuff we don't know about brain health, and there's some people out there peddling things that really we're not sure about. But there are things that science and evidence has shown. Nutrition is good. Obesity is bad. From nutrition, generally the Mediterranean diet tends to be the best. Exercise does improve our brain function. We want to control our stress. Humor and laughter is very good, and it's good for brain health. Multitasking, on the other hand, is not good. In fact, there's some early evidence that that's actually detrimental to long-term brain health. Our brain physically cannot multitask. We just move between multiple objects and multiple topics at the same time. And it's certainly less efficient and probably adds to stress. We want to avoid depression. We want to stay socially active and connected. And one of the most important things is really to build a cognitive reserve. Stay mentally active. Invest in your brain, just like you invest financially. Always learn. Always be active in your learning with productive engagement. Sitting back and watching TV is passive. You want to be active in learning and reading and using creativity. What I like to say is develop a magnificent obsession. Always have something that you're learning and you're excited about, and move on from that. But you'll hear a lot more of this from our true expert, Hillary, who's going to take over with the presentation now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some strategies to optimize cognitive functioning in everyday life. So as we know, brain health is an essential component in maintaining a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle. And there are tools to help us maintain brain health and performance at any age. So the brain cannot function at its optimal level amidst frequent interruptions. It is constantly having to expend cognitive energy, blocking a multitude of inputs. And one cost of this disruption is also the additional time it takes to orient back to an interrupted task after the interruption is handled. So one study found workers, it took them about an average of about 20 minutes to reorient back to their task and get back into that flow when they were interrupted. But fortunately, we can engineer our environment to minimize distractions, whether they be audio distractions or visual distractions. And some concrete ways to do this are by turning off your music or TV, especially when you're working on a task that requires your concerted mental energy and effort. You can silence your phone or put it in a locked drawer to sort of avoid the temptation to be browsing on your phone. You can silence auditory email notifications for a period of time. Retreat to a quiet conference room or wear noise canceling headphones if you're in an open plan office space, or close your office door. It can also be helpful for reducing distractions to keep just one browser tab open at a time to resist the urge to be toggling amongst multiple pages and multitasking in that way. Or using full screen mode can also be helpful for honing in your attention. And the ability to sustain focus and block distractions is really important because it's a vital component in harnessing your cognitive abilities. We need to be able to focus deeply so that we can then engage in deeper level thinking and innovation. Also, often our own internal thoughts can be the largest distractors. So we might toggle off the task when we remember another task that we have to do. But one way to be able to reorient back to the task and focus singularly on one task at a time is to just jot down that distracting internal thought on a piece of paper and then go back to what you were doing. So it can be helpful to keep a pen and paper nearby for that reason. Some other concrete strategies for enhancing focus include minimizing multitasking. So rather than attempting to do multiple tasks simultaneously, it's recommended to just focus singularly and sequentially on one task at a time. So instead of multitasking, you want to single task. So chronic multitasking is one of the top modifiable brain stressors, and we often don't even realize we're engaging in it. So you might be, for example, writing a report and find yourself toggling over to your email each time you get an auditory email notification. But rather, instead of doing that and breaking focus each time, it can be a lot more helpful to kind of check your email in batches at regular intervals, whatever is kind of a reasonable amount of intervals for you. And that way, when you're working on one task, you're fully immersed in that task rather than kind of toggling back and forth, because that's really what our brain was not designed to rapidly toggle between multiple tasks with opposing goals. And it's an inefficient use of resources. It can be taxing and even toxic to robust frontal lobe function. And it's also, when you try to multitask, it's associated with more errors, error proneness, less efficiency, and shallower thinking. So particularly when you're engaged in tasks that require your critical thought and your analysis, execute your tasks sequentially rather than simultaneously. And that will improve your ability to concentrate on the task at hand and also improve the quality of your efforts. So I want to talk a little bit about ways to calibrate your mental energy and in terms of selecting daily priorities and allocating optimal mental resources to your tasks. So one tactic to help you manage your daily tasks is to take time to prioritize your tasks at the outset of the day or the night before. So I would recommend identifying your top 2 priorities that will require your concerted mental effort, your decision-making skills, your analysis, and during those times, do those top 2 priorities during the time when you are feeling most mentally alert, feeling most sharp and able to tackle those tasks, your brain's prime time. So first you want to figure out what time of day you feel the most mentally sharp and allocate those priorities during that time. Because often if we go in without a plan of attack, we might find ourselves most alert in the morning, but we're answering more email responses, for example, as opposed to working on our tasks that require higher level thinking and analysis and push the needle forward personally or professionally. Those critical tasks, by the time you get to those, you might have kind of squandered a lot of your cognitive effort and energy. So it's kind of about cognitive resource management as opposed to time management, figuring out when you're going to prioritize your more mentally challenging tasks during the day and restructuring your day to address those highest priority tasks during that time. So this allows you to focus more deeply on your tasks that require your concerted mental effort. And you can get those done as opposed to feeling like you were busy all day but didn't accomplish your most critical tasks. And then you can slot in your other tasks during the rest of the day. And that also enables you to feel more accomplished and help your tasks feel more manageable, which can reduce anxiety and depression and burnout, which are bad for the brain. Because I also recommend sort of chunking those tasks into smaller pieces. So being able to focus for 30 to 45 minutes of time where you are using the other strategies of single tasking and reducing distractions can allow you each day to make incremental progress towards your goals. And you want to do something that make a goal that can be accomplished today in a 30 to 45 minute period of time. So that might mean, instead of making a goal to write an entire paper, you might make a goal to write a section of that paper, or instead of restructure it, making a whole new organizational system, you might start with organizing one section of your file cabinet, for example. And that gives you that hit of dopamine that which you get in your own neuropharmacy. When you accomplish a task, you get a sense of reward and neurochemicals in your brain associated with those rewards. So you can actually feel more in control and get a sense of reward if you chunk your tasks into smaller increments and work on the tasks during the time of day when your brain is most alert. So a busy brain is not necessarily a healthy brain. A calm brain is a resilient brain. So a halt in constant thinking can actually slow the mind's rhythms to allow for more innovative aha moments. So if you think about, when do you get your best ideas, you might notice it might be in the shower, it might be when you're on a drive on a long winding road. It's not necessarily a time when you are actively reflecting on ideas and decisions. So I think that downtime can actually allow for more innovative, inspirational moments. And it can also recharge your mental energy. So everyone can have cognitive fatigue and sort of hit a wall from time to time. So when you put in these brain breaks throughout the day, kind of pre-planned, interspersed when you need them, you're less likely to kind of hit that wall, and you'll have better cognitive endurance. And so what is a brain break? So a brain break is basically 5 minutes of downtime. You can do a kind of the 5x5 method, taking 5 minutes of downtime at least 5 times a day throughout your day when you're not actively focusing on a task. So you're just kind of letting your mind rest. You're doing something that's relaxing. It gives your cognitive energy a rest. This might be taking a walk, watching the leaves blow, doing some stretches, or simply just turning away from your computer and letting your mind relax and wander. So a good time to take a brain break might be before going into a meeting. So kind of allowing your brain to downregulate stress before entering a meeting, as opposed to making additional calls or checking emails as you go from one task to the next. Just giving yourself those short 5-minute breaks 5 times a day can be really helpful. And they're meant to be times of zero cognitive effort or zero thought, not zero thought at all. So as we know, kind of the brain is constantly on, working to consolidate and synthesize material, but you're not actively, trying to problem solve or focusing on any one thing during these times. So paradoxically, it's kind of less is more in those times. So another thing to consider is that optimal brain health is not just about, it's not about how many details you remember, but also really important is how you use the information and knowledge to engage in abstract thinking and innovative problem solving. So you want to constantly push yourself to abstract and synthesize information at the big picture level. So just as with our physical health, we always want to continually challenge ourselves, and just one day at the gym is not going to kind of build muscles alone. There needs to be that continual effort. So too with the brain, we want to keep ourselves intellectually challenged. And your ability to identify the deeper level meaning within a complex situation is a critical skill for robust frontal lobe function. It engages the frontal lobes of the brain, which are actually the frontal lobe of the brain, which is actually the largest area of the brain. And so you always want to find new ways to do this and challenge your higher level thinking. And so we've actually seen that concerted efforts to engage in this kind of thinking has shown increases in neural connectivity and brain blood flow. And brain blood flow is important because it brings nutrients and oxygen to the brain. So some ways to continually challenge yourself to think in this way, to take a lot of vast information and sort of distill it down to its core meaning, its bottom line meaning, or its essence, or its pearl of wisdom. So some ways that you can do this is when you see a movie, for instance, rather than just saying, okay, I saw this movie and, I thought it was interesting. Thinking about, on a deeper level, what were some of the themes of the movie? What were some of the life lessons that could be extrapolated and generalized to your life from that movie? Or for example, if you read a book, if you had to write a 1 to 2 sentence synopsis of the book, the main themes of the book and what it was about, challenging yourself to be able to boil it down to one sentence. How would you convey that information to a friend or a family member who asked about that book? Because as they say, brevity is the soul of wit. It actually can be even harder to boil everything down than it is to kind of include all of the details. And so you can also engage in this kind of bottom line up front mentality with your written communications. So for example, in the military, there's a term sort of bottom line up front. So you could try with your emails thinking to yourself, okay, I'm sending this email. What is the bottom line message or the takeaway meaning that I want my email recipient to get from this message? And starting with that, boiling it all down to 1 or 2 sentences up front. And then from there, kind of letting the details kind of trickle and flow down as needed, rather than being overly inclusive with the details. So this also engages the frontal lobes of the brain and challenges you to think at that big picture level and abstract and synthesize the information. Another way to kind of be able to process large amounts of information is the top 2 rule. So what you can do is take information that you read or hear and think of your top 2 takeaways. So these are the ideas that are the most important and actionable to you in terms of the reason you sought that source of information. And then put those top 2 takeaways in your own words to reinforce the synthesis of that information. Making personal connections to the information is also very helpful because it creates these associative linkages in memory. The more associations you have to the information, kind of linking the new information and binding that to your existing knowledge base helps you to remember that and anchor that more deeply in memory, and also makes that fodder for innovation and making the information your own. So one component of frontal lobe function is also mental flexibility. So that's breaking out of that one right answer mentality in order to strengthen your cognitive flexibility is really important for brain health. So being innovative or mentally flexible means you can interpret information in novel ways. You can see a multitude of perspectives and possibilities, and this excites the brain. In contrast to more rote thinking, where you might get stuck in more repetitive patterns of thinking. So you want to capitalize on opportunities for innovative thinking and recognize the tendency to get stuck in a mental rut. So for example, a good opportunity for innovation could be in meetings when you're trying to solve a problem or analyze complex information and you're brainstorming. Just kind of slow down and take a step back and allow your brain to consider a multitude of possibilities. Even if you automatically kind of honed in on an appropriate solution or it's a familiar situation to you, just kind of think a little bit more about the broader possibilities to avoid falling into a one right answer mentality. And seek out alternative perspectives and try to come at the information from at least one completely different angle than your go-to response. Or for example, if there's a certain issue that you're reading about, talk to people with a different opposing view and sort of learn the counter argument of that issue to practice kind of flexibly shifting your perspective. And you don't need to do, wild innovation simply for the sake of generating a large quantity of ideas. That might be, more impractical, but when it's things that you do often that are important personally or professionally, even small kind of incremental tweaks or innovative ideas can really make a big difference. If you can improve upon your processes, even just that a little bit incrementally over time, that yields big benefits. And innovation doesn't have to just be in a workplace scenario. So oftentimes the greatest fodder for some tweaks or changes or innovations can be in our personal lives. We can think about, am I always starting my emails the same way? Am I always writing the same kind of thank you note? Is there a way for me to be more thoughtful in how I, write that email or write that thoughtful note, that thoughtful thank you note? Or is there, a way for me to change maybe the types of conversations that I'm having with certain people? Are there other topics that we haven't addressed yet? Is there a way that I can improve upon even small processes like how I do my meal prep at home, things like that. So just kind of figuring out what areas of your life might you be working at status quo. This could even be, just going to the same restaurant every time and figuring out how to kind of switch that up or try out new hobbies. And this is a way just to keep your brain nimble. So it's challenging for the brain and engages the frontal lobes of the brain. And so sleep is a very crucial component of brain health. So the average adult requires about 8 hours of restful sleep nightly. And not only do we need adequate sleep to feel more clear-headed and able to focus, but recent studies have shown that sleep may serve an important role in removing potentially harmful debris, beta amyloid proteins, which are actually linked to Alzheimer's disease from the brain. So the cerebral spinal fluid kind of flushes through these channels in the brain that open up during sleep and help to kind of wash away, kind of cleanse that debris. So that's something that's been discovered somewhat recently as a potential role in how sleep affects your brain. And so if you have something like obstructive sleep apnea, you might have some hypoxia where you're getting more limited oxygen to the brain. And so you want to discuss sleep apnea with your physician, as a sleep study may be warranted if you are noticing a lot of heavy snoring and excessive daytime sleepiness, even though you feel like you've been sleeping an adequate number of hours, or if you wake up feeling like you're choking in your sleep. Another thing in terms of behavioral habits that can help be conducive in promoting sleep is avoiding screen time. So the LED lights that are emitted by our devices, the LED light actually contains blue light. And so blue light is the same light that's emitted by the sun. So when your brain is exposed to blue light, you start to think, okay, maybe this is daytime, and you sort of, it's wakeness or alertness inducing. So before bed, you want your brain to know, okay, there's darkness, this is nighttime, and be able to have that correct circadian rhythm. so that you can sleep at night. So avoiding blue light from screens about an hour before bed can be very helpful to sort of avoid that light which mimics the sun and induces the alertness. So spikes in stress can decrease cognitive capacity. So chronic long-term stress is actually associated with the buildup of cortisol in the brain, which is tied to changes in the structure and the function of the hippocampus, including shrinking of the hippocampus, which is an area of the brain that's involved in memory, and worsened memory function. But establishing a habit of meditating daily can help you maintain and support your brain health, particularly as you age. UCLA, the Mindful Awareness Center, it's marc.ucla.edu. They have some free guided meditations. There's also a lot of apps like the Calm app, for example, Buddhify, that have free guided meditations that can be helpful for managing stress. And then interestingly, even just taking 5 long, slow breaths can help quickly lower stress hormones like cortisol and help you think more clearly. So there is that mind-body connection where when you are meditating or deep breathing, you're actually stimulating the vagus nerve and inducing a process that allows you to calm some of the stress hormones and bring in hormones and neurochemicals that induce more calmness, which can help with clearer thinking. And also, help with fight or flight. So when you're in fight or flight mode, your sort of amygdala is kind of hijacking your brain somewhat, and you're not as able to leverage your prefrontal cortex, which is the more reasonable part of your brain. So taking deep breaths can actually help you to kind of bring your prefrontal cortex, your reasonable part of your brain, online and help you to think more critically and manage stressful situations. And a lot of stress can also be the way that we react to and interpret stress can be depending on our framing of the situation. So some situations might represent an adversity, or they might represent an adventure or a challenge. So if you sort of see the situation depending on how you frame it, that can also be what, impact whether it's sort of positive, exciting stress or more negative stress. And we know that it's important to be kind to your health for many reasons, but one of them is that there is that link between heart health and brain health. So your brain doesn't, exist in a vacuum from the rest of your body. Your heart pumps that nutrient and oxygen-rich blood to your brain, and so that's why it's important to keep your heart and your blood vessels healthy. And to do so, you want to focus on what the American Heart Association identified as the Simple Seven. So there's 7 factors that can be helpful for both heart health and in turn brain health: managing blood pressure, controlling cholesterol, reducing blood sugar, getting active, eating better, losing weight, and ceasing smoking can all be helpful in terms of reducing cardiovascular risk factors that are for both heart disease and dementia. So the American Heart Association has a tool called My Life Check. That's an interactive online tool that helps you assess and track your heart health information and gain a better understanding of your risk of heart disease, as well as brain problems like stroke. So again, that's called My Life Check. You want to check that out. And these are just some resources to our organization, Inova, as well as the Center for Brain Health, one of our collaborators at the University of Texas at Dallas. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Luriviere.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Hillary. Good evening, everybody. Let me start sharing my screen here real quick. And just put that up. So what I wanted to talk about for the last bit of our time together is some of the cognitive research we're doing at Inova, and highlight some opportunities to participate if that's your interest, or just learn a little bit more about what we're doing day in, day out. But before we get to the research itself, it might be helpful to think about a framework for thinking about thinking. And as we conduct cognitive research, these are the kinds of topics that we're interested in and the kinds of areas where we really would like to know more about how the brain functions. And so real quickly, I'll go over these ideas of cognitive resistance, resilience, reserve, and whether cognitive training has any place in affecting any of these other three buckets. First, there's the idea of cognitive resistance. And sort of just to put it as plainly as I can, it's the idea that an individual doesn't have any evidence for dementia-associated injuries relative to that person's age, genetics, or other factors. So for example, the highly functional 100-year-old person who doesn't seem to have any evidence or indication of cognitive dysfunction. That's a little unusual given the prevalence of cognitive dysfunction in the general population at that age. So that would be an example of cognitive resistance. And there's a couple of subcomponents to that and possibilities for looking into for why someone may be displaying a high degree of cognitive resilience. One being an intrinsic nature of that person. That is, there's something about his or her brain or body that provides that person with greater defenses against cognitive decline associated with a risk factor such as age, or that person has not been exposed to one of a number of environmental triggers that can begin the cascade of cognitive decline during one's lifetime. So when we're thinking about research paradigms and constructing research protocols, we're thinking about this as one possibility of investigation. And then there's cognitive resilience. And this is for something that we talk about when we see people who have demonstrated brain injury of one kind or another, and yet their cognitive function is a lot better than we would expect given the nature of the injury. And again, there's something about this particular person that allows them to perform at a higher level than expected, despite the fact that they have a brain injury. This also is an area of potential research, and we can learn a lot about how brains function efficiently or inefficiently in different states of disease and injury. And then there's cognitive reserve, which is another sort of way of thinking about what Hillary touched on just a minute ago. And you can think of this as sort of intellectual capital or a buffer against cognitive decline. And it's built up over the course of our lifetime through a variety of mechanisms that have to do with our level of education and reading and the life experiences that we're exposed to as we go along through life. How socially connected we are with our friends and family, and how much we challenge ourselves day in and day out with intellectual pursuits or intellectual challenges. A lot of this is also related to health, as Hillary just mentioned. Probably the most important piece of this is frequent and regular exercise, especially cardiovascular exercise or aerobic exercise. We know that increases blood flow to the brain, it improves synaptic connections to the brain, it makes thinking more efficient. But there's lots of other things that we can do at any time during our lifetime to build our cognitive reserve, and that includes appropriate diet intake, appropriate diet and appropriate weight. Don't smoke, control your sugar, and control your emotional health as well. That means taking care of moving out of stressful situations or learning to deal with stressful situations in a productive way. And as always, our genes are the wild card in a lot of how we think about cognitive reserve. And some people are genetically predisposed not to have cognitive decline as they age, and others are predisposed to have cognitive decline. And that we can't do a whole lot about that yet, but there are some intriguing possibilities with our ability to silence certain genes, and that there's a lot more to come in that. And I put this this little picture over here on your right for those of you who are interested in music or learning an instrument. this is a great book to talk about how music can do a lot to help. Well, it stimulates the brain in lots of different domains, and is thought to be really good at building up cognitive reserve. There haven't been any studies proving that, of course, but it's an interesting area of intrigue for those of us who like to do research in this area. And so one of the things that I put out at the beginning of this little section is whether cognitive training can have an effect on cognitive performance. And I bring that up because we're embarking on something called the Brain Health Project with the University of Texas at Dallas and Inova. And it's a pretty large international study that is going to try to do quite a number of things. And I've listed them here on the slide. But one is to begin to define what it means when we talk about brain health. What are the parameters? What are the minimum and necessary criteria to say that someone's has a healthy brain? And we'd like to be able to measure that, and we'd like to be able to put that into some type of dashboard or some type of feedback for folks who are in this study, which they're calling the Brain Health Index. So it's loosely, it's a composite picture of brain performance at any given time across the domains of cognition, what your daily life looks like, what your sense of well-being is, and sort of a short descriptor of social interactions that you're currently involved with. And how do we then enhance or maintain or even regain health across all those domains, brain health across all those domains? Would it help for us to engage in training? And that's what we're trying to find out. So the folks at UTD and the Neuroscience Center have constructed a program that involves brain training using self-paced activities and live coaching, as well as a composite index of performance, the Brain Health Index, to see if we can make strides in this area for folks that are enrolled in this study. And to participate, or what does participation look like in this study? Well, you sign up, and it's relatively easy to do, and it's free. And you go through a series of questions to determine what your personal brain health index would look like. And they provide you with a dashboard to let you see sort of what you score in all the different domains. After that, you have a live virtual feedback session with a brain health coach who's been trained and certified by UTD to review the brain health index and set some individual goals for your participation in the study. And then after that, it involves some training with self-paced online modules to start looking at ways to improve cognitive efficiency and to impact the Brain Health Index scoring. And thereafter, you'll meet quarterly with a brain health coach and redo the Brain Health Index composite every 6 months to see if there's been a movement across the scores in the different domains. And Dr. Getz is our campus PI for this study and can give more information about how to enroll and how to go about participating. And you don't have to be diagnosed with any particular disorder, or there are no disorders that you can't be diagnosed with to participate. So if you're interested, reach out to Hillary and she can give you some more information about that. In addition to the Brain Health Project, we're also doing some research around Alzheimer's disease or cognitive disorders here at Inova. And we're pretty passionate about this. And Dr. Rogers is our director of the Movement Disorder Program here. He couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm subbing. But we all pretty firmly believe that cognitive-related research is important to advance our understanding of the ways that we can understand how brain function declines over the course of our lifetime, as well as ways in which it is preserved over the course of our lifetime, and ways that we can intervene on it to make it better in the face of decline. And we consider research participation a real great way to contribute to our understanding of brain and brain function, and really are open to enrolling folks who are interested in research at any time. Right now, we have about 4 clinical trials that are in startup phase, which means that we're getting all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted, and all of the regulatory requirements put together. And some of these trials are also involve investigational compound that you can possibly receive in a clinical trial. And for more information about clinical trials at Inova, our research coordinator manager is Carly Smith, and I put her email address here down at the bottom of the slide. So if anybody's interested in that, you can reach out to Carly and she'll tell you more about some of the opportunities here at Inova. I think that's my last slide. This is just a map of all of our locations around Northern Virginia. And almost all of these you'd be able to find our research folks and can steer you into more research directions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and leave myself on, and I think Dr. Eklund and Dr. Getz and I will be available for questions if we have any.
We do have some, and thank you all so much. That was very informative and very exciting to hear about the initiatives at Inova. We do have a couple of questions that came through. The first one is related to focusing, and it is, do outside stimulants like coffee help someone focus, or do they make things worse?
Hillary, you can take that, or I can, either one.
You can go ahead.
So like all things, caffeine is both good and bad. In moderate amounts, caffeine can improve your ability to focus. But as we get to reach for that 3rd, 4th, 5th cup of coffee, some of the side effects can really make us more distractible, including high heart rate, jittery hands, and that feeling that you just got to keep moving. Yeah, a little bit of caffeine is good. A lot of caffeine is bad.
Perfect. The next question that we got is, how do you know when mental changes are normal rather than something to be concerned about?
That's another good question, and feel free to jump in, anybody. But a couple of things that that I use as a rule of thumb. First of all, there may not be one factor that tells you if it's something to be worried about or if it's just normal age-related change. But the rate of change is important. The faster things are changing, the more likely it is to be something that we need to look at. The harder it is to function in your life, the more impact that it has on your day-to-day function, the more serious it probably is. And the more your family members talk to you about changes that they're seeing is probably another little clue that maybe we should get in and do a little work together to figure out what's going on. Hillary, did you have any others that I missed? I don't.
Yeah, I think that when it's kind of more consistently occurring as opposed to more like occasional lapses of memory, and when those lapses start to, like Dr. Lervier said, get interfering with your day-to-day functioning at work or at home and are noticeable by other family members. And sometimes paradoxically, with some conditions, we might not notice it and our family members might be more concerned than we are. And that can sometimes be a sign of certain diseases as well.
It's probably oversimplistic, but I remember a neurologist telling me once, Stan, I don't know if this is true or not, but is if you recognize that you're having these troubles, it's probably normal aging. It's when other people are recognizing it and you're not, that it's more of a disease type state. And I remember myself, I think I was in mid 40s or something, and I have the good fortune of having a few high school friends that still get together every year or 2 years just to stay in touch. And so we get together and go skiing or go boating or do something. And we got together on one of these long weekends, and in the morning over coffee, we'd sit and chat about life. And I started saying, I'm starting to forget some words. And it was worrying me because I thought, geez, am I getting Alzheimer's? I mean, it's like I don't remember names as well. And sometimes I have to think more on words. And that never happened. But I was so pleased to hear every one of my classmates had the exact same thing. So that's normal aging, right?
Well, I hope so. Since it happened so long ago and you're still kicking, I think it's okay.
I was going to say, Dr. Eklund, I'm really happy to hear you say that as long as you're aware of it, because when I have, we all have times of higher stress, and during those times, I get worried about myself. Another question that we got is, how old, or is there an age limit to participate in the brain health program?
I'm going to toss that to Hillary because I don't have the criteria in front of me.
My understanding right now is that it's 18 and up. So it's adults and older adults are eligible.
There's no high-end cap, Hillary?
I'm not aware actually of any upper level cap right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I remember when we were first discussing this, and there's at 22 sites internationally involved in this. Inova is one of them. The goal is 100,000 people, so we can really study. It's almost like a Framingham study for the brain. When we were first discussing it, I thought they had said 80 was the high, but I don't know that that's true. So again, Hillary will find out. If someone's interested, don't hesitate contacting her and she'll verify.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask, and then we can check it on our end.
Perfect. And then another question that we got is there a recommended amount of time, and I guess per day, to work on cognitive tasks to help improve brain function?
So I would say the best thing to do would be to sort of continually incorporate it into your everyday life. So with some of those ways to kind of abstract and synthesize information, kind of constantly pushing yourself to do that whenever you would encounter lengthy, complex information, kind of asking yourself, what are my top 2 takeaways, or how could I distill this down in 1 sentence, or what are the main messages that I'm seeing? So I think that there's, sort of unlimited potential in terms of continually incorporating it out throughout your day.
Perfect. I can tell you that your comments about the bottom line up front is something that I think is great. And sometimes, and I'm guilty of it, of writing some really lengthy emails. And so I appreciate that very much. That was the last question that we had.
So Angela, if I can say just a couple things. So I do think that as far as the amount of focus, it's very individualized, because there are some people that really stay pretty focused longer, and you feel it. You feel the exhaustion. You're not performing as well, and that's when you need to take a break. And some of the burnout occurs when you don't take a break and you keep pushing through day after day after day. So we're all human, and we got to recognize that. And the other thing I was going to just comment, you mentioned something about stress and anxiety, and how you can't think when that happens. And, a little bit of stress is probably good. It makes us focus. But too much stress, too much anxiety does, it truly becomes, it's almost a fear type thing, and where you cannot think, you cannot function. And that's everybody. I don't care how big or tough you are. When fear starts setting in, you let anxiety go, you become paralyzed from a thought process. So the key is never, ever let that happen. Don't get to that stage. And I tell my kids, anxiety is just the misuse of the imagination. So you can choose to imagine bad things, or you can choose to imagine good things. So have the discipline to choose those good things, so you don't get that anxiety that causes fear.
That's great. I really like that.
I was going to say, in terms of kind of training your attention, or, focusing on one task at a time for periods of time. If you feel like, 20 minutes of just focusing on one task with no distractions is too difficult, people can also kind of train in intervals and work their way up to that, or try, 10 minutes at a time without interruptions and, without going on their phone, and 15 minutes, and sort of work their way up as they go. But they can kind of scale back and take more breaks as needed.
That's perfect. We did also get one more question. And this one is, I have cervical stenosis with myelopathy affecting motor skills. What is the best way to keep on top of neurological changes? And I meet with a neurologist every 3 months.
So I take care of this as a neurosurgeon. And when I see someone who comes in we operate on people, not x-rays. So just because you have cervical stenosis doesn't mean you need an operation. But if you have cervical stenosis with myelopathy that starts to progress and cause trouble with your ability to live life well, we want to operate at that stage. And the early signs are things like numb hands, especially at night. You lose dexterity where you're not tying ties well or buttoning buttons well. Or walking, you go for a walk, and at a mile or a mile and a half, your legs start getting a bit awkward, almost like you're not controlling them well. Those type of signs are symptoms of myelopathy. And then we look on the exam, and I'll see people every 3 months or every 6 months, depending on their situation. But we're looking for certain signs on the exam that we can pick up as well. But that's the way this is managed. So it sounds like if your neurologist is seeing you every 3 months, you're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Dr. Eklund. All right. Well, thank you again to everybody that joined us tonight, and a very, very warm thank you to you, Dr. Eklund, and Dr. Getz, and Dr. LaRiviere. We appreciate your time, and just really excited to see where Inova takes these initiatives. We're really excited about them here. So thank you so much again, and have a great night.